Hi everyone. Today we are going to have a discussion on an AI agent. Now, in the past couple of months, we have been talking so much about the agents, AI, and things around the data science, AI, ML, and the development has been made so far. Now, because of the advent of LLM, which is large language model, these agents has been so much popular, and because of the continuous development which is going on the LLM side, on the generative AI side, these LLMs are becoming powerful day by day and as we speak. So I thought of why not, take these, agents and we create an agent for our DevSecOps. So past couple of months, I've been exploring a lot on the Gen AI side, create a couple of projects around it and thought of hey, why don't I just do something around the DevSecOps as well and share those knowledge with you as well. So, right. So what we are going to do today is we are going to create a very simple agent. Now, the whole objective is at times, which I've seen in the past as well, that we need to create and we need to analyze our S3 buckets. So, if you guys are an AWS user, you probably know what an S3 is, which is a simple storage provided by the, AWS. So we need to analyze our S3 bucket for variety of information. So for example, hey, is my S3 storing the right information? If, is it working perfectly fine? Is there some sort of the issues which is there or not, right? Like the encryption is enabled or not. So variety of things which is basically being there. So what I'm going to do is we'll talk about that and we'll create a small agent in order to get things done for us. But before that, let's try to analyze what these NI agents are and what are we basically going to do about it. Now, if you look into it in general, what the AI agents are. So AI agents means that it has to interact with multiple different, tools component. Now, the general idea is that when we, talk with LLMs like the Chat GPT, Gemini, and different LLMs out there, you give them a prompt, and so you basically give them a user basically give them a prompt, and these LLM sends you some sort of the response. Now, the problem with these sort of the LLMs are that they are, trained on a specific data till a specific dated time. So let's say by 2024, these data has been trained. Now, if you are basically going to go ahead and extract and ask the information to fetch some latest. So hey, what is the current weather of, Delhi, for example, right? What is the weather situation in Delhi and stuff like that. Now, these things won't be, the LLM won't be able to do it because, LLM does not know about the current data points. Okay. It does not know, hey, I have to go and do a Google search and stuff like that. And that's where the AI agent come into play. Now, the best part about the AI agents are that, what it can do is you can have, one agent and it can start now the LLM can basically decide, what it has to talk to, right? So LLM. So for example, hey, I want to do a Google search. So what you basically do is you already have a method to do some Google search. You have written that algorithm to do some sort of the Google search. Now LLM knows that hey, I have to make a Google search on top of it. Or let's say you want to send some email, right? So now LLM knows that hey, this I have to send some email on top of it, or do some other XYZ, activity, or based upon your requirements. So all you just have to do is ask the LLM, hey LLM, can you just email me what is the weather at Delhi, for example? So, you just write it down to an LLM, send a prompt, right? And LLM will go back and, make a query to Google, fetch the, weather, and then, make a query to your, email method, and then start sending an email and, response back, hey, the email has been sent and stuff like that, right? And that is the power of AI agent. Now, taking this example of the AI agents, and we are basically going to design our own AI agent. Now, our AI agent is going to be about an S3 analyzer, right? S3 audit analyzer. Now, in order to do that, right, we need to validate, a few things about the assets. For people who have already worked into the, you know, DevOps, DevSecOps, or the cloud side, you probably are already aware that, hey, you know, this S3 auditing is something which is very much, crucial because you need to have some sort of the policies being there. For example, hey, if my, the bucket is, public or not, does it has a public access or not, right? Or is it encrypted or not, right? So majorly what, today's program, project will be based on the public encrypted. We can also check for the versioning, right? So versioning. We can also check for if it has some, life cycle policy in, enabled or not. Now, how the structure is basically going to go around. The structure would be same thing. Like, a user make a query to a LLM. Now, for this LLM, I'm basically going to use my OpenAI. So you need to have an OpenAI in order to, basically we need to make an OpenAI API call, right, to get our task done, right? And LLM on that, front will make a query to our function, right? And we can also call it as like a function calling. So function, which will, which is, responsible for making and, fetching information from AWS S3 and, getting the task done. Uh, and that is where the LLM is going to decide whether it has to make some query to the function or not, right? Now, while writing this function, we already know that AWS comes across with AWS provides us with an SDK called as the Boto3. So for people who know, it's good. If you don't know, just know that AWS provides us with a Boto3 to do some sort of the automations on top of it. So what we do is like while writing about the entire function, we use this Boto3 to basically get our entire task done, right? So we'll make a query to it. Now this part of the code I have already written it down because a bunch of lines of code I'll explain it to you which is there. But how do we make an AI agent call is something which we are basically going to write down, make this query to the functions and get our basically task done. So without wasting time, let's start the discussion. Okay, so now let's just start writing the piece of the code. As you can see that I have written like two files which needs to be created. One is an app.py file where I'm basically going to write all the piece of my important code, right? All the agent, calling of an agent and everything around it. And I have already created an S3 policy.py file. Now this already consists of bunch of code altogether. Now this code is all about like how do we audit an S3 bucket. Now, if you see this, because we have to, audit an S3 bucket. So I've written a piece of code for auditing an S3 bucket altogether. As I mentioned, like, we need to have, four parameters which we need to evaluate, which means like, is public, whether the, bucket is encrypted. And third one is if the version is enabled or not, and if it has a lifecycle policy. Now, we are using a Boto3 library, which is basically an SDK provided by the Python AWS, which you can use with both the Node.js as well as the your Python code as well in order to automate a lot of stuff. In this case, we are trying to automate our S3 bucket, processes altogether, and that's exactly where we have written our piece of code as well. Now, this one consists of an audit S3 bucket where whole objective is I am listing down all the bucket. So this function consists of the bucket name, right? If you want to specify a bucket name, let's say I want to an audit and specific bucket. So I've written that a specific bucket name as well. Then I also have, something like a region filter. Now region filter is, something which basically consists of the region name. So for example, if you have a specific region to work around, let's say, hey, I want to work around with the Mumbai region or something like that. So, you can also do it. Now, again, these things are completely optional. So if you don't run the specify, it will go through your entire S3 and then do an evaluation to it. So that's why I have written by default it's a none, but then again, you can go ahead and provide. And the type is always a string type, which is there. Then I'm initializing the Boto3, the general stuff, right? I'm trying to list on all the S3 bucket, putting up some things as well that if the bucket exists or not. The list of buckets are going to get in an array format, right? And then I am basically looping them all across. I'm looping through it, extracting the name of the bucket, right? And obviously looking if the bucket is in a specific location or not. If not, also by default, like set up my default location as US East location. Um, okay, now I'm basically putting a filter location, right? If the region filter is specified, then you basically map it around. So for example, if someone mentioned, hey, look, I want to look it for the AP South 1 region, right? Let's say I just want to audit all the bucket for AP South 1, which is a Mumbai region. Then when you get all the list of all the bucket, let's say bucket 1, right, bucket 2, right, and so forth. What you're basically attending is like, because every single bucket is in a specific region, and S3, as we already know, is a global, is a global service, right? So you can list down all the buckets. So let's say this one is in US East 1 and stuff like that. Different one, different. So what this will basically do is like if something is not in the region that we want to check it, then it will basically skip that particular bucket in that specific filter, and then it will move on to auditing that particular bucket as well, right? Okay. Then the whole point is that we are basically looking for, so by default I'm specifying none, to check if everything is there or not, and then I'm checking it for everything. So for example, if I'm checking it for encryption, I'm checking it for the if that particular version is there or not. Similarly, I'm just checking it, if the ACL is enabled or not, right? Just clear. ACL is enabled or not. I'm checking if even the life cycle of the bucket is specified or not, right? Uh, so all these parameters I can check. Now you guys can actually go across, and I mean if you guys want to write it from the very much scratch, you guys always have an option to go to your you know AWS Boto3 Python SDK and go to the official documentation of that, and there you'll be able to find out every single parameter. So you can, if we are working with an S3 documentation, go to an S3 documentation, right, and then you can see like how do you go around like every single parameter. So just letting you know, just in case if you are interested in going through everything from the scratch, this would be a good starting point to work across. So Boto3 provides you with an services, access to all these services using the Python code, as I mentioned, all across. Then we check it around if the public access, so public access, lifecycle access, and everything is there. If something is not there, then we put it up a warning, right? And finally, all these, we are appending the entire result, right? And then just stepping it across. I've also created a file name called as S3 audit report, right? So every time you do an audit, it will basically create an audit report, right? Remember, this file is not JSON file. Now, if you want to integrate a PDF format or anything around it, you can go ahead and implement that part of the code as well. So I'm basically opening a JSON file format, right? Integrating and then finally returning the entire summary of my audit report and the results that I have, received so far. So a final JSON file with the entire audit report is being there. Now again, I can extend it to work around with an, a PDF file and everything around it. I'll share a link for the full project with a proper PDF file into your GitHub, which will be in the description of the video. So go ahead and check out this page as well. So this is a generic code which is already there. Now I'm going to write out the code for my agents. Okay, and this is going to be an interesting part because I have to run through this entire agent from the scratch itself. So in order to run through the agent from the scratch, there are a few things which I have to start doing it. First of all, I'll have to make sure my OpenAI is there. Right, so just OpenAI. So install my OpenAI. If you don't have an OpenAI, go ahead and install the pip install OpenAI. It will install the library for an OpenAI as well. Since I'm working with okay, since I have to work with a JSON, I'll just put JSON, right? If you want to work with an operating system, just go ahead and work with that, right? Okay, anyway, I think we're good to go on the site. Now I'll just first initialize my OpenAI, right? Because I'm going to use this OpenAI, for variety of part API key, and I just have to specify the API key for an OpenAI. Now, how do you get an API key? Ideally, there are two ways to put it across. Security wise, this is not an idea that not a good idea to basically hard code your API key. The best part is that you use a .env file and then you specify an API key and everything around it. But for the sake of this project, for the sake of video, like to make it easy, I'm just writing it down. Although you can use an import OS, specify it at first.cut environment, and fetch it around. Else you don't even need this particular import altogether. Now, how do we create an API key? You go to an uh, you know um, dashboard for an OpenAI API key, which is like platform.openai.com/settings/organization/API keys, and then you can simply go ahead and create like S3 audit project, right? You select the default project, whatever the project you want, and then you get an API key. Okay, so now that we've got the API key, we can simply go ahead and save this API key, and now we can simply go ahead and start working around with it. So the first thing is that we need to make an API, we need to make a function call. Now this function call is already specified in my, function call reference. Like you can go to an, documentation of the OpenAI, and you can look about how they have basically created. They have created tools and then they have created the response and asking for the response altogether. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm basically creating a tools. This tool is basically a function which I have to use. Now remember, like I have specified that S3 policy that I have to call. You can always go ahead and call this S3 policy from here, which is the Audit S3 bucket. You just go ahead and call things around it. And finally, I'm basically going to specify this API call. So type is going to be the function, which is okay. And type. So let me just write it down from this scratch because I might not need a lot of things all across. So first I'll go ahead and write about the type. So type is going to be function without a doubt, and then I'm going to specify about the function. So what this particular function is going to be. Now this function will consist of a name, right? And this name is going to be the name of the bucket, the function that is going to analyze my bucket. So I'm going to save that. Then I'm going to specify about my description, okay, which is description, and this description would be what this particular function is. So audit S3 buckets for security risks. You can audit all or specify a bucket name or region. Okay, cool. Next, we go ahead and we use the parameters. Okay, so the parameters are basically like the parameters which I can pass on to this function audit S3 bucket. Now, if you look into an audit S3 bucket, there are two parameters, which is that like a bucket name and a region filter. So I'm basically going to specify these two parameters over there, bucket name, and the second one would be a region filter. Okay, so I just specify this. The second one would be about the region filter, which I have to write down. Now this one will, here I have to specify what is going to write, the strings, number, or what type, right? The type of type. Now you already specified it's going to be in a string, so I'm specifying in a string. You also specify a description about it, right? The description is, there's an optional specific bucket name to audit. So any specific bucket name that you want to run, you can have it. Now, what about this one? This is the same thing, but it's going to be type string, but optional specific, AWS region, AWS region to, you know, to filter and audit buckets. Cool. So we did specify, both the part which is there. Now, all we just have to do is we have to call our agent with this part. So the best part is like, what I try to do is like, I, mostly write methods to, analyze things across. Okay, so I'll just write a method like a user prompt. Okay, and this will basically take, prompt from user. Okay, so, ask your DevOps AI agent for audit, for auditing S3. You can ask any prompt. So user enters a prompt here, and this prompt has to, go and call this agent, which I'm basically going to define now. That has to call the, agent altogether. So basically write def run agent, right? And now, so run agent and pass on this user underscore prompt to it. Okay. Remember, this is going to be a type string. Good idea to, do some check into it. And finally, I love to write a lot of, print statement, seeing like, if there are some buckets or error, then, asking GPT to analyze user prompt and decide which tool to call. So I'm basically like, asking GPT to see like, hey, look, which tool should I call? Because it has multiple tools. Now, right now we just specified one tool, but GPT can have multiple tools to just select from. And that's how you create a multi AI agent, where you create multiple tools. Now I just created one tool, but if you just want to create, maybe in some video I can show it to you guys, uh, you know, but here if you want to create, you can simply go ahead and, go ahead and create multiple tools. Right now, since we just had one tool, so I'm basically specifying about that tool altogether, right? Okay, so now I'm just going to work around with the response from the ChatGPT. So first I'll just make sure I, ask chat about it, right? Completion start create, create. Okay, so now this accepts a model, which model I'm going to use. So I'm just going to use GPT-4. Not sure if I have GPT-4o mini. So, okay, I'm just going to use a GPT-4o mini. You have a list of, models to choose from, and then I'm just going to use messages, right? Okay. Now this messages will consist of the both, the user prompt and the system prompt. So I'm basically going to specify a role that, hey, this is going to be a system prompt, right? And then the content to it, right? Okay, because I have to write in multiple lines, and that's why I'm basically creating these multi-line ecosystem. Similarly, just like what you wrote for about, the user prompt, you'll have to do, sorry, the system prompt. You'll also go ahead and write a rule for you know, the user prompt as well. So role user and then, content. And the content, I'll just write about what user is basically asking for. Okay, now in this, you just have to specify the entire, log. So you are an AWS Cloud Security Auditor. Your job is to check AWS S3 buckets for misconfiguration, misconfigurations, including, I think my spelling is wrong. It doesn't matter though a lot. Okay, so it's basically going to accept for the public access, right? It's going to accept for the unencrypted packets. It's also going to check for the missing versioning, right? And it's also going to check for the missing lifecycle policies. So these are, thing. Now I'll just also specify that, hey, look, go ahead and use the AWS SDK to audit each bucket and return a detailed risk analysis for every bucket. Oh, cool. So if a script returns me the, tools, I need to specify the, types of tools that it has, right? So which is going to be the tools, okay? And also like, how they're basically going to make a choice to tool, which is I'm setting it up an auto. Now GPT will return me a tool choice that, it want to call. So now I just need to extract that tool choice, which the GPT is specifying to me. So if you go to your choices, you'll get that list of tools which GPT wants you to, do it. And this is going to be the part where, you get it. So in the response, you'll have choices that is going to be an array. You take the zeroth element of that array, you go to the message, you go to a tool hyphen underscore call. Just in case if you're, still confused, you can always go ahead and print the response that you get it from it, and trust me, you'll find out the same thing. Just in case if anyone wants to do it, feel free to, ping it down. Now, if tool calls, right, let's say we get a tool call, then I just, going to specify results, right? And for call in tool calls, because it can be one tool, multiple tool, who knows, function name equal to be call dot function dot name. Okay, and finally, I'm going to specify an arguments to it. JSON dot loads call dot function dot arguments. Okay, if function name in handlers. Okay, so here I need to, define some handlers as well. Handlers are the one which says like, what is specifically going to be specified, right? So, tool call is fine, but how do you define that, this audit S3 bucket is actually this audit S3 bucket? And that's where the handler come into play. So handler is the one which, you know, basically is going to define that, what this, how these things are basically being linked with each other. Otherwise, these are just a bunch of, text which is there. So audit underscore S3 underscore buckets, right? Which is, there. And I'll just, because this is the same name as, you know, this. Now, initially, if you remember, like I asked you that, it needs to be the same name. The reason why I'm putting up into the same name is it becomes easier for me to basically manage things around. So whatever function that you create, you do need to create and handler, you know, specifically in that particular direction. So I'm basically looking for if during my handler that particular function is present, right? If it's present, right? So if function name in handler, because I need to call that particular functions as well. So I'm just going to write okay, result equal to handlers, right? And the function name, and then I call this function name and pass these arguments. Great. So results, right? And because I create a result, I'll just append that particular result. Okay, and write the function name and result. Okay, else if that's not there, then results dot append, right? Here I'll just write an error that function 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 name, right? What are the function name? I'll just specify that it did not get not implemented. Not implemented. Okay, that's it. So basically specifying that it didn't get implemented. Okay, that's it. So yeah, that's it. Then we have okay, so we have if else statement. Finally, we return it for the results. Okay, once my results have been done, I do a return for results. Else if, okay, because I'm missing on this part as well, return, let's return a response, which is going to be my, okay, that some here like GPT did not call any tool. Okay, so maybe an X symbol specifying that something went wrong, or maybe a okay. Finally, once this is done, so we just have to print out the results. Print JSON dot dumps, and we do results dot indent equal to 2. So what we did is like, let's do a quick recap of what we did so far. Okay. So what we have done, we imported the OpenAI, right? We also imported the method which we have already defined, which is an Audit S3 bucket. We created an OpenAI endpoint, specified the OpenAI API key that we created already. And finally, we have, created a tools, which is like a function, specifying about an Audit S3 bucket. That's going to be a function. And this is exactly the function which we are going to work around with that. Then we created a handler. Now, handler is basically pointing out that, okay, this function, when I'm basically going to talk about this function, I mean you to call this specific function from my, the actual Python code. If you don't map this across, this audit S3 bucket mean nothing. Okay. So good idea to not mess it up is to have the same function name, not necessary that it needs to have this. Then, as you guys know, I like to write the modular program. So I created a method called as run agent, which is whose objective is to, first make a call to an OpenAI endpoint and say, hey, look, you know, specify a system prompt and a user prompt and specify, hey, look, can you just tell me that this is the scenario? What, tools are you willing to talk, right? So they respond with a tool, and I go ahead and execute that particular tool, right? That's it, done. So now I go ahead and start running things across, and if everything works perfectly fine, right, then you can have it. So I'll just go ahead and run this tool. Okay, I'm just hoping that we don't make ask your DevOps AI agent for you know auditing S3. So can you audit? Let's say I just want to audit my episode one. You know, can you audit episode one region? Okay, so it's basically asking an OpenAI which tool to call, and it made an error, right? It looks something, that part, there is some chat completions, right? Okay, it says, invalid schema for our schema must be a JSON schema of type object. I think I missed some part while, defining it, right? So let's just go ahead and, oh, okay. I actually missed one of the parameters over here because when I'm defining a parameters, right, I overlooked to it, and type is an object, and I am basically going to, because I think like yeah, this is what it says. So I have to specify an object parameter as an object, and then specify the properties. Inside the properties I do have to specify it. Okay, so which is okay. So I will, you know, properties. Okay, and then I specify things across and put both of these parameters inside it. Okay, it should be okay, right? Okay, it should be okay. Let's go ahead and run it. Once again, can you audit AP South 1 region? Just making a request to analyze user prompt and decide which tool to call. Okay, cool. So now it has started, auditing. So as you can see, like, it's finding out something which is not in an, episode one region, it will not audit. And if it's finding out in an AC southern region, it has started and, auditing of that tool. So it's auditing some of the tools and stuff like that, right? And once the audit has been complete, as saw that in the S3 policy, we have written a piece of the code whose objective is to, basically work around and, store that in a JSON file as well. So once the audit has been complete, I'm expecting it to, store that in the JSON file as well. Okay, so finally it audited all of them, and the audit report, as you can see, it's a big audit report which we have, received all together, and it's a big audit report which you have, have received in the JSON file. Obviously, if you ever want to go ahead and convert this into the a proper PDF format, go ahead and do it. So that's all from the our code where we actually created an AI agent. Pretty much easier to do it. You can have an orchestrated AI agent, when some of the other tasks, and we'll probably look into some of the AI agent, more AI agent into various fields of the DevOps and cloud, and probably some other fields around it. That's all from this video. Thanks a lot for watching.